The ocean still pings at me sometimes. Not in my ears, my head. Like a sonar return you can't turn down. It'll hit when I'm rinsing a coffee mug or when the shower drain gurgles wrong. And I'm right back there. Salt on my lips, beer stink on my breath, old wood under my boots, and the harbor water out the window black as oil. I don't go to bars anymore. I don't play games. I don't sit with my back to a window that looks out at water because I learned the hard way that the dark outside isn't empty. Sometimes it's looking in. I was on my third beer in a dockside place that pretended it wasn't a dive. You know the kind. Boat names carved into the tables, a net with plastic floats stapled to the wall, and the floor always damp like the building sweats brine. Every time the door opened, you got a breath of cold sea air and diesel. Every time it closed, the place went back to that warm, wet stink of spilled liquor, fried food, and harbor rot. I'd come off a job 3 days earlier. Offshore deep, ROV support and dive standby for a rig maintenance run that went long and mean. I was still hearing compressors in my sleep, still tasting that weird metallic tang you get after a long day on oxygen-rich mixes. My hands had that faint tremor from too much caffeine and too little rest, and my ears still clicked when I swallowed. I looked like hell. I knew it. The bartender, Carl, knew it too, because he kept sliding water my way without making a show of it. That was the year I couldn't get away from water, even when I was on land. It was everywhere. In my clothes, in the creases of my skin, in the sound of pipes in my apartment, in the way my brain kept replaying the one moment I never asked it to. My brother Jonathan had died in water. People say lost at sea like it's poetic, like the ocean gently takes you and you become part of some big blue mystery. That's not how it happens. It's ugly and fast and stupid. It's a checklist item that doesn't get checked. It's a comms line that goes quiet. It's a gloved hand slipping on a rung. It's a pressure change. It's a valve that doesn't seat. It's a scream you don't hear because there's too much water between you and the sound. 7 years. And I still woke up with my jaw clenched, so hard my teeth ached. So yeah, third beer. Harbor bar. Trying to make my head go smooth for one goddamn night. She must have noticed me before I noticed her, because when my eyes fell on her, she was already looking my way. Not the casual, you're in my line of sight look. The stare. The kind that pins you even when you try to pretend it doesn't. Like a light on a depth gauge you can't ignore. She was sitting at the bar with her elbows on the wood like she owned it. Short black dress, bare shoulders, even though it was cold enough outside to raise goosebumps on the fisherman. Crimson hair that looked too clean to belong in this place. Eyes the color of shallow water over sand, green, bright, wrong for the room. A snake tattoo ran up her arm, black ink scales curling like it wanted to move. As soon as we made eye contact, I looked away. That's just me. I hate the awkward little dance of being caught looking. I took a long pull of beer and pretended to check my phone. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her keep staring. No blinking, no little smile, just watching. Carl put a fresh beer in front of me. I didn't order this, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I meant. Too many days with a comms headset clamped to my skull. Carl gave me a little wink. It's from the girl sitting at the bar. I actually looked up then, dumbfounded. I did the small nod thing you do when you don't know what else to do. Thanks. Appreciate it. Please don't come over here and make me talk. She took it as an invitation anyway. She slid off her stool and walked over like the floor wasn't sticky and the room wasn't full of men who'd been at sea too long. She moved like she wasn't worried about anyone touching her, like she knew nobody would. So, she said, and her voice had that low, smoky edge that makes you picture late-night radio. You finally stopped avoiding my eye contact, huh? She took the seat right next to me. Too close. My nerves kicked up on instinct, like my body was reading a hazard sign my brain hadn't seen yet. Sweat slicked my back under my jacket. I hated that. Hated the way my body did that around pretty women like I was still some awkward kid. She smiled like it was a joke we were sharing. I tried to play it cool, trying to catch my eye. Were you? She looked at me like she was expecting something more. Like my line was part of script and I'd missed my cue. Can I get you a drink? I said, because that's what you say in bars. Something strong. I called Carl over and ordered her vodka. Straight. No lima, no soda, no nothing. She didn't complain. She didn't even flinch when she drank it, just tipped it back like water. What's your name? I asked. It's Madeline, she said. Jack, I said. So what made you sit down next to me? You have inviting eyes, she said, and I was bored. If it wasn't for that second part, I said, I'd be flattered as hell. She laughed. It was a real laugh. Warm, sharp, quick. Interesting choice of words. I didn't get it. I laughed anyway, because I was already a few beers in and my brain was lazy. Outside, a foghorn moaned somewhere out in the channel. A long, low note that made the glass on the window vibrate. The harbor water slapped against the pilings like wet hands clapping slow. Madeline's chair scraped a little closer to mine. Do you live close by? She asked. 10-minute drive, I said, if the bridge isn't up. Interesting, she said again, like she liked the word. Like she tasted it. She took another sip of vodka. Her nails were painted a deep red that matched her hair. When she set the glass down, I noticed a thin line of moisture under it, like the outside of the glass was sweating more than it should. Condensation in a warm bar, fine, whatever. Except the ring on the table wasn't clear. It was dark, oily, like the glass had been lifted out of bilge water. I told myself it was nothing. Spilled stout. Sticky table. The usual. Want to play a game? She asked. I snorted. What darts? Pool. Truth or dare? I should have said no. I know that now. But my brain was somewhere between tired and lonely and stupid, and there was a beautiful woman looking at me like she'd already decided I was coming with her. Sure, I said. You go first. She leaned in like she was sharing a secret. I smelled something under her perfume. Salt and cold metal. The inside of a dive helmet. The smell you get when you crack open an old watertight case. How about we make it more interesting? She said. If you win, you get to take me home tonight and do whatever you want. If I win, I get to take you home. The way she said it put a little hook in my chest. Take you home, not come home with you. Like she was the one deciding where home was. So what will it be? She said, truth or dare? This sounded like a win-win to the version of me that hadn't slept right in months. I've been on a dry spell that was embarrassing even to admit. Work, grief, the constant pressure of being the guy who's supposed to keep other guys alive underwater. There wasn't room for dating. There wasn't room for much besides staying functional. Dare, I said, try not to sound eager. My kind of guy, she said, and her smile sharpened. Let's see what to make you do. Her eyes flicked around the bar. Not scanning faces, scanning corners, dark spots. The place is water-pooled when nobody mopped. Oh, she said like she'd found it. I know. You have to steal something from this bar. I barked out a laugh. Seriously? Seriously, she said. You can pick anything, but you have to actually steal it. I looked around, thinking of something harmless. A coaster, a shot glass, a stupid little anchor keychain off the wall. I didn't want to get tossed out, and I sure as hell didn't want Carl thinking I'd gone feral. Okay, I said. Be right back. I went to the bathroom, and here's where I need you to understand. Even the bathroom in that place was water-themed. The sink was a chipped porcelain thing with a drain that gurgled like it was swallowing more than water. The mirror had rust freckles around the edges. The floor was always wet, like the building leaked from the inside. I stood at the urinal and listened to something dripping in one of the stalls. Not a steady drip, a slow, patient tap like someone was dripping water from a finger. There was no one else in there. I grabbed a roll of toilet paper off the little shelf and shoved it under my jacket like I was 12. When I came back 2 minutes later, I dropped the roll on the table. Madeline laughed. Well, she said, not exactly the great heist I was expecting, but I guess it'll do. Her laugh made me relax a little. My shoulders unclenched. I took a pull of beer and felt it hit my stomach with that warm weight. Your turn, I said, feeling bold. Truth or dare? There was a malicious flash in her eyes. Quick, like sunlight on a knife blade. Dare me, she said. Get a stranger to buy you a drink, I said. In this bar. She rolled her eyes like I'd bored her. At least make it a challenge. She stood up, and I swear to God, the temperature in the room shifted with her. Like the air got heavier, like a storm had pushed in without the windows noticing. She walked to the other end of the bar where two guys were murmuring over beers, rig hands or fishermen, both with knuckles that looked like they'd been split 100 times. She leaned in, said something I couldn't hear over the low bar noise and the distant foghorn, and one of them went pale like he'd seen something in her face. Not 3 minutes later, she came back with a vodka and a beer and set them on the table. "Got you something as well," she said. "Now tell me, boy, truth or dare?" "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice even. I'd expected her to flirt, not whatever that was. The guy at the bar was staring into his glass like he was trying to drown in it. "Give me a truth." Madeline's smile widened just a little. "When's the last time you fucked someone?" she asked. It landed like a slap. Heads didn't turn, nobody was listening that close, but my face heated anyway. I hesitated, trying to decide if I should lie. But something about her stare made lying feel pointless, like trying to hide from sonar by holding your breath. "I'm going to be honest," I said. "It's been a while." "How long is a while?" she asked, leaning in. "A year," I said, and the word tasted bitter. "Over." She looked genuinely surprised, like that hadn't been in her file. "Oh," she said, and for a second her eyes softened. Then it was gone. "Well then," she said, "you just have to make sure you win tonight." To be fair, in that moment I thought I was doing okay. I thought she was just intense. A little weird, a little too forward, but still human. Still a bar hookup with a spicy edge. And then my drunk brain found a dare I thought she couldn't possibly do. The kind of dare that would make her laugh, call me an asshole, and declare me the winner. "Truth or dare?" I asked. "Dare," she said instantly. I took a breath. "Okay, Madeline," I said, and I made my voice low, like I was some kind of man with confidence. "Take off an article of clothing." I watched her face, waiting for the eye roll, the nope, the game-ending laugh. She smiled instead. "The gloves are coming off, huh?" she said. "Finally. Let's play then." And as she said it, she reached under her dress and slid her underwear down her legs like it was nothing. Like she'd done it 100 times in worse places. She didn't stand. She didn't hide it. She just moved and it was gone. My brain shorted out. I tried to look cool and casual, but I know I stared. I know my mouth fell open like an idiot. She laughed, and without saying anything, she leaned closer and slipped the underwear into my jacket pocket like she was planting evidence. The fabric brushed my knuckles, and I swear it felt damp. Not warm from her skin, cold damp, like it had been dipped in seawater. "Truth or dare?" she asked, and her voice was softer now. Intimate, like she was speaking through a comms mic right into my ear. I knew if I said dare, she'd pick something insane. The beers were getting to my head, but some part of me was still trying to play defense. "Truth," I blurted. Her eyes went cold. Not angry, not offended, just empty, like someone had drained the expression out of her face and left the mask behind. "Do you still think about your brother a lot?" she asked. Everything in me snapped tight. I went from tipsy to sober so fast it felt like hitting cold water. My stomach dropped. My skin prickled. My mouth tasted like pennies. What did you just say?" I asked, she said, calm as anything. "Do you still think about your brother?" My heart started thudding so hard I felt in my throat. "Who are you?" "It doesn't work that way," she said. "You have to answer or you lose." A laugh tried to crawl up my throat, but it died halfway. I glanced around the bar, suddenly aware of how empty it was. A local drunk slumped in the corner like a thrown coat. Carl chatting with a blonde who looked like she didn't belong there. Two guys at the far end, murmuring low. The guy who'd bought Madeline a drink now sat with both hands wrapped around his glass, staring like he was waiting for something to climb out of it. The foghorn outside moaned again, and with it came that faint, rhythmic slap of water against wood. The building creaked. Pipes ticked. I could have stood up. I could have walked out. I should have. But fear isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's a hand on the back of your neck holding you in your chair. Every day, I said. The words came out small, honest. I hated myself for giving her that. Madeline's face flickered. For a heartbeat, she looked surprised. Then she laughed, bright, delighted. "Oh my," she said. "You really are someone special. I was sure you would have walked out after that one." My hands clenched around my beer so hard the glass squeaked. "How do you know about him?" I asked. "Nobody." "Well," she said, tilting her head. "Don't you have anything to ask me?" "It's your turn, Jack." Hearing my name from her mouth made my skin crawl. I hadn't told her my last name, but even first name, still, it felt like she'd pulled it out of my throat. "Who are you?" I said. She frowned like I'd broken a rule she cared about. "No," she said. "That's not how this works. Second time. You get one more chance." Her eyes flashed red for a split second. Not a cute contact lens red. Not a trick of the bar lights. Red like a warning light behind thick glass. Red like the indicator that says you're running out of breathable gas. I swallowed, so hard my ears popped. Summoning whatever courage I could find, I forced my mouth to work. "Truth or dare?" I asked. "That's more like it," she said, smile returning. "Truth." I felt my jaw tighten. "Who are you?" I asked anyway. She exhaled like she was amused by my stubbornness. "I have been known by many names," she said, "on many different planes." Her voice shifted as she talked. Not louder, deeper. Like two voices were stacked, one under the other, and the lower one had water in it. Every word sounded like it was spoken through a flooded radio. "One of the names your people gave me," she continued, "was Apollyon. Others called me Abaddon." I stared at her, and the room seemed to tilt. The bar noise dimmed, like my ears were filling with water. The foghorn outside stretched into a low, endless note. She smiled sweetly, like she was telling me where she went to school. "Though the legends far outweigh my actions. This body isn't even mine," she said, and she tapped her own chest lightly. "It belongs to someone who performed a ritual with her friends. Cheap thrills. Coastal girls love old sailor stories. Call something up from the deep. Invite the sea in." Her green eyes held mine. Now she gets the privilege of being mine until I'm sick of her. I shook my head hard, like I could shake loose from whatever this was. "This has to be some kind of sick joke," I said. My voice cracked on joke, which pissed me off. I didn't want to sound like prey. Madeline didn't blink. "Truth or dare, Jack?" she asked. My mouth went dry. "Truth," I said, because I didn't want another dare from that. "Do you believe what I'm telling you?" she asked. "No," I said immediately. "This is too much. I don't believe you." Her lips twitched. That was it. No argument. No convincing. Just that faint, satisfied sound like my denial fed her. My brain scrambled for something solid. Something normal. A way out. I thought about Jonathan again, like my mind couldn't help it. 7 years ago, we'd been younger and dumber. We'd both worked water. Different sides of it. He'd gone Navy, submarine pipeline, sonar, deep systems. I'd gone commercial diving because I was an idiot and the money looked like freedom. He died on a training run off the coast. That was the official line. Accident. Systems failure. A quiet funeral with a flag and a folded triangle and a lot of words that meant nothing. But I'd heard things. Whispered things from guys who'd served with him. A classified incident. A sonar contact that wasn't a contact. A pressure door that didn't open when it should have. A banging on the hull from outside at a depth where nothing should have been alive to bang. I'd buried those whispers because they were poison. Because if you let yourself believe there was something out there that could reach a metal coffin under miles of water, you'd never sleep again. Madeline watched me spiral and looked pleased. I felt trapped. Walking away crossed my mind again hard. But fear had claws in me now. Because she shouldn't have known. She shouldn't have known anything about Jonathan. We'd moved states after his death. I didn't post about it. I didn't talk about it. I barely said his name out loud. Still, I kept playing because the game gave me a framework. A ritual. A set of rails. And I didn't trust anything else in that moment. "Truth or dare?" I asked, my voice tight. "Dare," she said. My mind went blank. Everything I wanted to say was either leave me alone or get the fuck away from me. And something about her earlier rule made me think that wouldn't work. I still tried. Go away, I said. Leave me alone. She laughed. That's not how this works, she said. Leaving is a forfeit. She leaned in close enough that I could see the tiny flecks in her irises. They weren't flecks. They were movement, like silt suspended in water. But she added, I'll be kind and give you one more chance. We can't dare each other to go away or to kill ourselves. Now give me a dare. The way she said kill ourselves was casual, like it was a house rule in a board game. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. I forced it down. Fine, I said, and my anger flared up to cover my fear. Prove to me you are who you say you are. She smiled wider. That, she said, I can do. She reached out and grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were cold. Not cold hands in winter cold. Cold like a metal ladder in deep water. Cold like the inside of a flooded compartment. And the second her skin touched mine, the bar disappeared. I didn't pass out. I didn't black out. It was like someone yanked a dive helmet over my head and slammed me into another world in a single breath. I stood in water, not swimming, standing like the water had weight enough to hold me upright. It pressed against my chest and shoulders like hands. It filled my ears with that dense, muffled roar you get when you're submerged, and everything is vibration. There was no surface, no up, just black water in every direction. But it wasn't empty. Dim blue lights pulsed in the dark, bioluminescence, like deep-sea creatures flashing warnings. Except these lights didn't move like animals. They moved like a thought, like something in the water was breathing light. Far away, something pinged. A single sonar return, clear and metallic. The sound didn't come through ears. It came through bone. Ping, then another. Ping. With each ping, the water around me shivered. Shapes shifted at the edge of vision. Long, slow things that didn't care about me the way predators care. They cared the way tides care. There were structures down there, too. Metal shapes half buried in silt. Sections of hull. Pipes. Grates. The skeleton of something made by humans and broken by pressure. Barnacles clung to it like teeth. And in the distance, rising out of the black like a mountain, there was a wall. At first I thought it was a trench edge, or an underwater canyon. Then it moved, and the movement was so big my brain refused it. The wall wasn't a wall. It was something side, something vast, something with ridges like armor, something that made the water itself seem thin. At the center of everything was a pit. Not a hole in ground. There was no ground. It was a depression in the water, a place where the darkness sank lower, where the pressure felt sharper. In that pit were bodies. Thousands, maybe more. They weren't floating. They weren't sinking. They were packed together like cargo in a hold. Their arms tangled, their faces pressed, their mouths open. I knew they were still alive because of the bubbles. Tiny streams of bubbles came from mouths and noses and eyes, like the water was pulling breath out of them. The sound of their suffering wasn't a scream. It was a constant, muffled, vibrating moan that ran through the water like a current. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to claw my way up to a surface that didn't exist. And then I saw his eyes, buried beneath others, swollen face pressed against someone's shoulder, hair floating like seaweed around his head. But the eyes, God, the eyes were the same eyes I'd grown up with. The same eyes that used to roll at my jokes and light up when we talked about stupid dreams. Jonathan was in that pit. The shock should have frozen me. Instead, something snapped in me, hard and bright. All the fear I'd been holding for years burned off in 1 second, and I surged forward, pushing through the water like it had suddenly become air. I went toward him. The shapes in the dark shifted. The big thing in the distance turned, slow as a continent moving. Ping. The sonar sound hit again, and my teeth rattled. Jonathan's eyes widened when he saw me, and in that widening, I saw something worse than pain. Recognition. Like he'd been waiting. Like he'd known I'd come. I reached for him, and I blinked. One blink. And when I opened my eyes, I was back in the bar with Madeline's fingers still wrapped around my wrist like a cuff. My chair squealed as my body jerked. Beer sloshed. My lungs sucked in air like I'd been drowning. The bar lights stabbed my eyes. The room smelled like grease and liquor and wet wood, and I wanted to sob from relief and terror at the same time. Madeline sat beside me with that same soft smile, like she'd just shown me vacation photos. "Don't make a scene," she said quietly, "or this won't end well for the people here." My hands shook so hard I had to put them under the table to hide it. My throat hurt. My eyes burned. My brother was trapped in that. And this thing wearing a pretty girl's face didn't want me to make a scene because it might inconvenience her. "Get him out," I said, and my voice came out hoarse, ugly. Tears slid down my cheeks before I could stop them. I hated that too. I hated giving her anything. Madeline watched the tears like she was watching rain hit a window. "Poor baby," she murmured. "I know it can't be easy, facing this reality." She lifted a finger and wiped a tear from my cheek like a lover. Then she brought that finger to her mouth and licked it clean. "God," she said, and her eyelids fluttered a little. I loved that taste. My stomach twisted. Rage hit me so hard I saw white. For half a second, all I could think about was grabbing a bar knife, the kind they cut limes with, and driving it into her eye. But I didn't, because I'd seen the pit. I'd seen Jonathan, and I knew she could do worse than kill me. "You told me if I won," I said, fighting for control, "I could do whatever I wanted." She chuckled like I'd said something cute. "You sweet child. The deal was that you could do whatever you wanted to me," she said. "And I really mean that. You can hurt me. You can fuck me. You can take every ugly thought you ever had and make it real." Her smile widened. "It sounds like a fun night." Then she leaned closer, and her voice dropped, heavy as deep water. "But you can't tell me what to do." The way she said it almost sounded like sympathy. "Almost. Please," I said, and I hated myself for it. Hated the way the word came out like I was begging a storm not to hit. "Get him out." Madeline's eyes held mine, calm and bright and cruel. "Truth or dare, Jack?" My jaw clenched. My hands were fists under the table. My nails dug crescents into my palms. "Dare," I said, because if I kept choosing truth, she'd keep digging into me. She'd keep taking pieces. Her smile sharpened. "Make yourself bleed," she said. I stiffened. "Hold on," I snapped. "You said we couldn't ask each other to harm ourselves." She laughed, and the sound had a wet edge to it like bubbles breaking. "I said we couldn't tell each other to kill ourselves," she corrected. "I just want to see a little blood." I stared at her, stunned by how casually she said it. Like it was a sip of vodka. Like it was nothing. My mind raced. If I refused, I lose. If I lose, she takes me home, and I didn't even know what that meant anymore. If I played, I was giving her what she wanted, but at least I stayed in the game. At least I stayed in a structure I could maybe twist. I pulled my pocket knife from my jeans, keeping it under the table. The blade clicked open with a sound that felt too loud in the bar's low hum. I held my left hand palm up and drew the blade across the pad of my finger. Not deep, but enough. Pain flared, sharp. Blood welled up dark in the dim light. Madeline's eyes locked on it like a starving thing. She grabbed my hand and brought my finger to her mouth. Her tongue was cold. She licked the blood clean in one slow motion that made my skin crawl. When she pulled back, her lips were wet, and for a second, I thought I saw something shift in her teeth, like they were too many. "Do you like that?" she asked softly, licking the last of the blood from her lips. "No," I said, and my voice shook with hatred. "I don't." She laughed like that was the best answer. I yanked my hand back and wiped it on my jeans, smearing red. "Can we just ditch the small talk and play the fucking game?" I said. That only seemed to excite her. She leaned forward like a gambler, smelling a big bet. "Truth or dare?" she asked again, because she could. Because she owned the rhythm. "Truth," I said, and my voice cracked. I didn't care. How can I get my brother out of there? I demanded. How do I get Jonathan out of that pit? She tilted her head and studied me like I was an animal she'd found tangled in netting. "You can't," she said. "Simple. Flat. Your brother played a game, and he lost." My throat tightened. "What the hell are you talking about?" Her eyes gleamed. "It's that simple," she repeated. "Even if you manage to return, there's not a goddamn thing you could do." Those words hit like a weight on my chest, like a diver's belt dragging you down. I wanted to shout. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to grab Carl and scream at him to call the cops, the Coast Guard, the Navy, God, anyone. But Madeline's earlier warning sat in my mind like a hook. Don't make a scene, or it won't end well for the people here. And I believed her. I didn't want to, but I believed her. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep the rails. "Truth or dare, Jack?" she asked, almost gentle now. My hands are shaking again. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, fast and uneven, like it was trying to climb out. "Truth," I said. Her smile faded, and the cold in her eyes deepened into something old. "Would you take his place?" she asked. "If I gave you the option right now, would you go to the pit to free him?" My stomach lurched. "A soul for a soul," she said, voice low. "It's not a bad deal, right?" The room seemed to pull away. The bar sounds dimmed. Even the foghorn outside felt distant, muffled by miles of water that weren't there. Everyone likes to believe they'd be the hero, the martyr, the one who doesn't hesitate. I thought about my parents, their faces at Jonathan's funeral. My mother's hands clenched around a folded flag like it was the only solid thing left in her life. I thought about my father staring at the ocean like he wanted to fight it. I thought about all the times I'd avoided saying Jonathan's name because it hurt too much. All the times I drowned that guilt in work and alcohol and the steady hum of machinery. Tears filled my eyes again, hot and humiliating. I looked at Madeline, at whatever wore her, and I knew what I had to say, even if it was stupid, even if it was impossible, even if it was a trap. "Okay," I said, voice breaking. "Take me there. I'll take his place." Madeline's face opened into something that wasn't a smile anymore. She burst into laughter, sharp, manic, joyful. And the sound of it, right there in that damp harbor bar, made the water outside the window slap harder against the pilings, like something out in the dark was laughing too. Madeline's laughter didn't just stay in her throat. It spread. I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you what it felt like her laugh had weight, and it rolled out through the room the way a low-frequency engine note rolls through a hull. The glasses on the shelf behind the bar gave a tiny, sympathetic rattle. The neon beer sign in the window flickered like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay on this side of reality. And outside, the harbor water slapped the pilings harder, faster. Not wind-driven, not tide. It sounded like something was applauding. I sat there with my hands under the table clenched, so tight my knuckles burned. My cut finger throbbed in time with my pulse. Blood had dried on my skin in a dark, tacky line, and the smell of iron mixed with the bar's brine and fryer grease until my stomach rolled. Madeline finally inhaled like she'd just finished a good story. "Oh, my dear," she said, wiping nothing from the corner of her eye like she'd laughed so hard she'd teared up. "I just wanted to know if you would." I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "What?" I managed. "The offer," she said. "To trade yourself. To leap right into the pit for him." So dramatic. So human. You people love drowning in your own nobility. I leaned forward, too angry to be careful. "You said..." I said a lot of things, she interrupted, and there was again that double-layered voice. Dry on top, flooded underneath. "But listen closely, Jack, because I'm not going to repeat myself. I can't get your brother out." My stomach dropped again, but this time it was like an elevator cable snapping. "What do you mean you can't?" My voice got loud enough that Carl looked over. I forced it down immediately because Madeline's eyes flicked past me toward the other people in the bar like they were pieces on a board. "It's not mine to give back," she said. "Your brother belongs to the deep now, to that world and its inhabitants. Property. Salvage. Gotta go." She smiled. "And before you ask, no, it isn't fair. That's the point." The word salvage hit me like a hook. Jonathan wasn't a thing. He wasn't scrap metal. He wasn't a crate you could misplace on a manifest. I shook my head hard, like I could dislodge the whole conversation. He didn't. He wouldn't. My brain tried to grab onto the official story, The neat funeral narrative, the sanitized Navy pamphlet version of grief. He died in an accident. Madeline's mouth curved, amused. Accident, she repeated, like she liked the taste. That's what you call it when you don't want to look down. I felt my hand start to shake again, and I hated that she could do this to me so easily. Flip me from rage to fear to grief like I was some idiot fish on a line. Tell me, I said, pushing through clenched teeth. Tell me what happened. She leaned back and tapped her vodka glass with one nail. The sound was small, but my whole body flinched like it was a sonar ping. Ping, not the glass. Not really. The sound came from inside my head. I grabbed the edge of the table. Stop doing that. I'm not doing anything, she said, innocent. Your mind is just tuned. Outside, fog pressed against the window, so thick it looked like wet cotton. A ship's horn moaned again, low and far. The bar lights made reflections on the glass that looked, for a second, like ripples. Like we were sitting underwater looking up at the surface. Truth or dare, Jack? Madeline asked softly. My mouth tasted like old pennies. I wanted to throw the table at her. I wanted to run. But I also knew, deep in my bones, that if I broke the rules, if I stood up and bolted, I'd lose, and I didn't know what losing actually meant. Truth, I said. Her eyes brightened. How does it feel, she asked, to realize you never actually buried him? I sucked in air through my nose. Go fuck yourself. Madeline laughed, but this time it was quieter, more intimate. It's interesting, she said, how men like you can work around water your whole lives and still think death is something you can file away. You think grief is a box you can seal. You think if you don't look inside, it can't leak. I could hear the drip in the bathroom again in my memory. Tulp, tulp, patient. Like a slow leak you ignore until your whole compartment floods. What did he do? I asked, forcing my voice flat. What game? Madeline's smile thinned, and I felt, absurdly, like I'd scored a point. Like I'd hit a nerve. You want a story? She said. Fine, but I'm not going to spoon feed you. You'll answer for it. She leaned forward. Her perfume hit me again, salt, cold metal, the inside of a dive helmet. Your brother was good with sound, she said. He listened for ghosts in the wires. He sat in a metal coffin under miles of water and trusted that the pings meant something. He trusted patterns. He trusted returns. My skin prickled. Jonathan had been sonar. That wasn't a rumor. That was a fact. I hadn't told anyone in this state. I hadn't posted it. It was just part of him. Madeline's eyes glittered. Then one night, she continued, the ocean pinged back. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. Bullshit. Her eyes flicked red for half a second. Truth, she said sharply, like she was correcting me. It wasn't bullshit to him. I forced myself not to flinch. My heart hammered. The bar's ambient noise, the low talk, the ice clinking, the fryer hiss, felt far away, like my ears were filling with water again. They were running deep, Madeline said. Training, they called it. Testing systems. Listening posts, they called it. Little men in uniforms love words that make them feel in control. But the water doesn't care about your words. I could see it in my head. Jonathan in a cramped sonar room. Headphones on, fluorescent lights buzzing, the constant hum of the boat around him. The smell of recycled air and machinery oil. The way your skin always feels slightly damp in a sub because the air never really dries. He heard something that wasn't supposed to exist, Madeline said. A return at a range that didn't make sense. A pattern that didn't match any contact. Not biological, not mechanical. Something old, something patient. My throat tightened. He'd tell someone. He did, Madeline said, and she smiled. And they told him to keep listening. I slammed my palm under the table hard enough to sting. Don't what? She asked sweetly. Don't talk about him like you were there. Madeline tilted her head. I was there, she said. In the water, in the pressure, in the place where sound travels farther than light. My stomach rolled. I could feel that pit again, the packed bodies, the bubbles. Madeline went on, calm. He tried to make sense of it. That's what your brother did. He took the unknown and shoved it into a box he could label. So he started making it a game. A game, I repeated, disgusted. Truth or dare, she said, and there was a little smile of satisfaction, like the phrase itself made her salivate. He didn't call it that. He called it challenge response. He called it testing. He called it signal interrogation. But in the end, it's always the same thing. She lifted her vodka. You asked the deeper question, the deep answers. Then it asks you. Istère de hair. My scalp felt tight. He didn't invite anything. Madeline's eyes held mine. He answered, she said simply. A cold flush rolled down my spine like I'd stepped into freezing water. Answered what? Madeline shrugged, lazy. It doesn't matter. Something small. Something human. Something he thought was harmless. Men like your brother always think they can control the first move. I could hear my own breath loud in my ears. In, out, like I was breathing through a regulator. He lost, Madeline said, and that flooded voice under hers thickened. Not because he was weak, because he was curious, because he didn't know the stakes were real until the ocean collected. My eyes burned. I blinked hard, but tears came anyway, hot against my cheeks, and I hated that they tasted like salt because everything in my life tasted like salt now. Truth or dare, Jack? Madeline asked again, like she couldn't help herself. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, smearing tear and beer. Truth. Do you hate him for it? She asked. The question hit me in the gut. No, you snapad. I hate you. Madeline's smile widened. Now what I asked? I clenched my jaw. My fingernails dug into my palms again. I don't hate him, I said slower. I hate that he's gone. I hate that I wasn't there. I hate that I didn't. My voice caught. I hate that I can't fix it. Madeline watched me like she was watching a tide come in. She said, satisfied. So much pressure in you. I leaned forward and my voice dropped low. What do you want? Madeline's pupils seemed to widen, and for a second her green eyes looked like deep water at night, bottomless. Want, she echoed. I want what I always want. A taste, a reaction, a little ripple. She tapped her glass again. Ping. The bar's overhead lights flickered in response. Just a blink. But it made everyone in the place pause like animals hearing a distant crack of thunder. Carl frowned and smacked the side of the beer sign, like it was a wiring issue. Madeline smiled at me as if to say, see? I swallowed hard. My mind raced through options. If she couldn't free Jonathan, then what the hell was the point of keeping me here? Just cruelty? Just entertainment? And then something clicked in my head, ugly, desperate, but sharp enough to grab. You said, I forced out. If I won, I could do whatever I wanted to you. Madeline's smile turned indulgent. Yes, but I can't tell you what to do, I said. Correct, she purred. So the only way I get anything, I said, is if I make you lose. Madeline's eyes glittered. Maybe. I leaned back, trying to steady my breathing. Under the table, my cut finger had started bleeding again, slow. The sticky warmth against my skin felt wrong in a room that smelled like cold water. In the corner of my eye, I saw the drunk in the corner shift his head, lolling. The two guys at the far end were still murmuring, but their voices sounded muffled, like they were underwater. The man who'd bought Madeline the drink was trembling so hard his beer foamed over the rim, and he didn't even notice. Madeline noticed. Of course she did. You're not the only one who can taste salt, she murmured. This room is full of it. I swallowed. Truth or dare, I said, because it was the only weapon I had. Dare, she said instantly, almost eager. Tell me the truth, I said, and my voice shook with frustration at my own stupidity. No, damn it. I tried again. Show me where he is. Again, Madeline laughed softly. You already saw, she said. That's a gift, Jack. Most of your kind can't handle it. Show me, I repeated. Madeline leaned in, and her fingers touched my wrist again. Cold. The bar folded away like wet paper. I was back in the water, but it wasn't the same. This time, I wasn't standing. I was floating, suspended, my stomach lifting like I was weightless. The pressure pressed on my chest so Hard it felt like a hand trying to squeeze breath out of me. My ears ached. My jaw hurt. My teeth vibrated with each sound. The darkness around me wasn't empty. It was crowded. Shadows moved like slow thoughts. And the pings were closer now. Ping, ping. Each one came with a tremor through the water, a shiver down my bones. The bioluminescent pulses flickered again, but now they weren't random. They were patterned, like a signal. I turned, slow, and saw the structure more clearly. A mangled section of something human-made. Not a ship, not a rig. Something round and segmented, with torn metal and open ribs. It looked like a piece of submarine hull that had been peeled like a can. I tried to move toward it, but the water resisted, thick like syrup. As I drifted, I saw a writing on the hull. Not painted, not etched with a tool. It looked like it had been grown. Barnacles, algae, rust, all arranged into letters. I couldn't read the whole thing. My eyes kept sliding off it like my brain didn't want to hold the shapes. But one word snapped into place like a hook in my mind. Listen, then another. Answer. I felt a wave of nausea. My body wanted to curl in on itself, but there was no up, no down, no ground, nothing to brace against. Below me, the pit. It was wider now, deeper. The bodies were still packed, still bubbling, still alive. Jonathan's face was clearer this time, and it made my stomach twist because he didn't look like a corpse. He looked like a man held underwater too long, but not allowed to die. Skin pale, lips blue, eyes wide, desperate, furious. He saw me, and his mouth moved. No sound came through the water, but I saw the words. Jack, help! His hands pushed at the bodies above him like he was trying to swim through solid flesh. Bubbles ripped from his mouth and nose and eyes in streams. I surged downward. Something moved in the dark. Not a shark, not a fish. Something that didn't care about speed. Something that simply occupied space, and that space belonged to it. The big thing, the continent-sized presence, shifted, and the water around me seemed to tilt. A ridge slid into view, armored, lined with growths that looked like teeth. And then there was knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not on the hull. Not on anything I could see. On the water itself. Knock, knock, knock. Each one hit my chest like a fist. My ribs ached. My teeth rattled. I froze. Because I knew that sound. I'd heard it before, years ago, in the worst phone call of my life, in the half-whispered rumors from sailors who didn't want to make eye contact when they talked about it. Knocking from outside a hull at a depth where nothing should be alive to knock. Jonathan's eyes flicked upward toward the dark, and in that look, I saw pure terror. The knocking came again, closer. Knock, knock, knock. Then a voice, if you can call it that, rolled through the water like a deep, grinding current. Not words exactly, more like a pressure pattern my mind interpreted as language because it couldn't stand the alternative. It's your turn. My stomach lurched. My mind screamed. I tried to claw upward, and I blinked. Back in the bar, I sucked in air like it was my first breath. My chair lurched. Beer spilled. My cut finger smeared blood on my jeans. Madeline sat beside me, calm, smiling. You're sweating, she said. You always do, like you're trying to exhale the ocean. I stared at her, and my vision tunneled. The room looked wrong. The window glass looked thick like aquarium glass. The reflections on it looked like ripples. The fog outside pressed close, and for a second I swear I saw a shape slide past the window at dock level. A dark curve, slow, too big. I jerked my gaze away. Madeline leaned in. Truth or dare, Jack? She whispered. I clenched my fists. Truth, I rasped. Madeline's smile widened, and her eyes flicked red. Would you do it again? She asked. Would you listen if it called you? Would you answer if it asked? No, I said immediately. Madeline chuckled. Liar. The word landed heavy. I said no. I repeated, louder, and my voice shook. I'm not your brother. I'm not. You're worse, she said softly. He didn't know what he was doing. You do, and you're still sitting here. That stung because it was true, because some part of me still believed there was a lever, a valve, a trick that could change the pressure and pull him out. And I couldn't stop myself. "What's the stake?" I asked. "What does it want?" Madeline's gaze drifted toward the window again. "It wants what water always wants," she murmured. "To fill the empty space." I felt my throat tighten. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, voice almost tender, "it wants you hollow. It wants you open. It wants your fear, your grief, your guilt. It wants your answers. It wants the part of you that thinks you can bargain with the ocean." I leaned forward, and my hands clenched on the table edge hard enough to make my wrists ache. "Then what the fuck are you?" I demanded. "A messenger? A parasite? A what?" Madeline's lips parted in a smile, and for a second I saw something behind her teeth, something pale and ridged, like a barnacle mouth. "I'm the one who knocks," she whispered. Cold washed through me. I looked around the bar again. The drunk in the corner had slid down further, chin on his chest like he'd passed out. The blonde Carl was talking to had her hands pressed to her ears like she was trying to block out a sound nobody else could hear. The two guys at the far end had gone quiet, their eyes fixed on their beers like they expected something to rise out of the foam. Carl kept wiping the same spot on the bar again and again like he couldn't stop. The rag left wet streaks that looked darker than they should, like the wood was bleeding. Madeline watched all of it with lazy satisfaction. And suddenly I understood something that made my stomach flip. She wasn't just playing with me. She was using me like a tuning fork. She'd picked me because I had the right frequency, because I'd been around water my whole life, because I'd had a brother swallowed by it, because my grief was a hook already sunk deep. Every answer I gave her, every fear I showed, every tear, she licked it up and fed something bigger. "You're opening a door," I said, voice low. Madeline's eyes gleamed. "There's always a door," she murmured. "Sometimes it's a bulkhead. Sometimes it's a mouth." My cut finger pulsed, and I realized my blood had started dripping from the underside of the table. Drip, drip. It hit the floor with small wet taps, and each tap sounded too loud, too sharp, like a leak in a quiet compartment. Madeline's eyes flicked down. She smiled wider. I jerked my hand into my lap and wrapped it in my napkin, pressing hard to stop the bleed. "No, Isha, not feeding you anymore." Madeline laughed. "Then stop playing," she said. "Istir de her." "You said leaving is forfeit." "Everything is forfeit," she said lightly. "That's the fun part. You just don't know what you're forfeiting until it's gone." My heart hammered. My brain ran hard. I needed a move that wasn't just a reaction. A move that pulled the game off her rails. I thought about rules, about how she kept correcting me, about how she insisted on the structure. And I thought about what she'd admitted. "This body isn't mine. This body belongs to someone who performed a ritual," she'd said. Which meant she wasn't the girl. She was something wearing the girl. Possession, like a diver in a suit, like a pilot in a submersible, like a thing inside a hull. And if she wasn't the girl, then the girl might still be in there somewhere, trapped behind glass, watching. My stomach twisted with a different kind of anger then, pure, hot, protective, the kind that makes you move. I sat up straighter. I forced my voice steady. "Truth or dare, Madeline?" I asked. Madeline's smile sharpened like she'd been waiting. "Dare," she said instantly. Of course she did. Of course she wanted dare. She wanted control. She wanted to pick the next twist. And I knew if I hesitated, if I flinched, she'd smell it and tear it apart. So I didn't hesitate. "I dare you," I said, and my voice came out surprisingly clear, "to leave the body you're possessing right now." Madeline's smile froze. It was small, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. But it was the first time all night I'd seen her mask slip. Her eye twitched. Once. Twice. And the air in the bar seemed to tighten, like the pressure had just increased a few atmospheres. For a second, the overhead lights dimmed, and the neon sign in the window flickered hard enough to make the whole room pulse red-green-red like emergency lighting. Madeline stared at me. Then she laughed again, but this laugh was different. No warmth, no amusement. It was sharp, thin, irritated. Well, she said slowly. "Clever boy. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I didn't let my face move. I didn't let her see the fear behind my eyes. I stared back like I was staring through a dive mask at something ugly in the water and refusing to blink. "If I'm not here," she said, voice dropping into that flooded register, "I can't play the game anymore." "Exactly," I said. Madeline leaned in close, and the cold smell of metal and brine rolled off her skin. "Of course," she murmured, "you'll miss out on your prize." She let her gaze drift down my body like it was a joke, like sex and terror were the same thing to her. "Or who knows," she added lightly, "this girl might still be into you. Wouldn't that be cute?" My stomach turned. I wanted to spit in her face. I wanted to grab her by the hair and slam her head into the table. But I didn't move. I kept my voice low. "Just leave," I said. "Leave her. Leave me alone." Madeline's eyes narrowed, and for a second the green in them looked almost black. Then she smiled again, and it was the most human expression she'd worn all night. Almost fond. "Let's do this again sometime," she whispered. And then, without any build-up, without any ritual flourish, her expression changed. Her eyes went unfocused. Confusion flickered across her face like a light turning on in an empty room. Her mouth opened slightly, like she was trying to remember where she was. She blinked once, and she collapsed. It happened fast enough that I barely caught her shoulder before she hit the floor. Her body was heavier than it should have been. Dead weight. Cold weight. Her hair fell across her face like wet seaweed. For a second, the whole bar went silent, like the building itself held its breath. Then the drunk in the corner jerked awake and coughed hard, like he'd been underwater. The blonde at the bar sobbed once, sharp. One of the guys at the far and stood up so fast his chair scraped loud enough to make everyone flinch. Carl rushed over. "Holy shit," he said. "What happened?" My brain scrambled. My heart still hammered. My mouth was full of salt and blood and panic. She's had too much," I said, and it sounded like bullshit even to me. "She just passed out." Carl knelt beside her and checked her pulse with shaking fingers. "Jesus," he muttered. "She's cold." "She came in from outside," I said fast. "It's freezing." She hit vodka hard." Carl looked up at me, and for a second his eyes looked glassy, like he'd been crying too. "Did she take something?" he demanded. "Did you?" "No." I snapped, sharper than I meant. "No, I didn't do anything." Carl's jaw worked. He looked torn between anger and fear and the urge to pretend none of this was real. The man who'd bought Madeline the drink suddenly started whispering, rapid, frantic, like he was praying. "No more pings," he muttered. "No more pings, no more." He squeezed his eyes shut and rocked. Carl stood and pulled his phone out with hands that didn't stop shaking. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said. "Do it," I said, because what else could I say? Call a priest? Call the Navy? Call the ocean and ask it to stop? While Carl talked to dispatch, I sat back down hard like my legs had forgotten how to hold me up. The bar's window creaked in its frame. Outside, the harbor fog swirled, and I swear I saw the waterline on the dock rise and fall like it was breathing. Madeline lay on the floor, face turned slightly toward me, hair across her cheek. And I couldn't stop thinking, where did it go? Not where did she go? Where did IT go? Because it hadn't died. It hadn't been defeated. It had just slipped out of the suit. The ambulance took forever, even though we were 10 minutes from a hospital. When the paramedics finally came in, their boots squeaked on the damp floor, and one of them grimaced like he'd stepped into cold water. They checked her vitals, slapped pads on her chest, asked questions Carl couldn't answer. One of them looked at me and asked if I was with her. "No," I said quickly. I was sitting here. She came over. We talked. That's it." He gave me a look like he didn't believe a word, but he was too busy to care. They loaded Madeline onto the stretcher. Her arm flopped as they lifted, and I saw the snake tattoo clearly in the harsh fluorescent spill from the ambulance lights. For a second, I thought I saw the snake's eye blink. I flinched so hard my chair scraped. Nobody noticed. As they wheeled her out, a gust of cold air came through the open door, carrying the smell of the harbor, diesel, seaweed, fish rot, cold salt. The fog pushed in like it wanted inside, and with it came that low, distant sound again. Ping, not a ship horn, not a buoy bell, a clean, metallic sonar return that slid through my skull. The paramedic paused at the door for half a second, frowning like he'd heard something odd, then kept going. Carl came back to me after they left, rubbing his face hard. "You okay?" he asked, and his voice sounded like a man tried to keep his world normal. "No," I said honestly. "No, I'm not." Carl glanced at the door, then at the window, then back at me. "She freaked me out," he admitted. "Something was off. I don't know. People come in here drunk and weird all the time," but he swallowed. It felt like the air was wet around her. I looked at him and felt a spike of anger. Not at him, but at how small and human he was in all of this. How none of us had any business being pieces in whatever game that was. "I'm going home," I said. Carl nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, go home. Sleep it off." He hesitated, then leaned in. "Listen," he murmured, eyes flicking around like he didn't want anyone to hear. "If anyone asks." "I was never here," I said. Carl's shoulders sagged with relief. "Yeah," he whispered. "Yeah." I walked out into the fog, and the cold hit me like a slap. The dock boards were slick with moisture. The harbor water below was black, barely visible except where weak dock lights stabbed into it and got swallowed. Every rope, every piling, every moored boat looked like it was sweating. My car was parked a short walk away, and every step I took, I felt like something in the water was pacing me, just under the surface, keeping perfect time. I got in and slammed the door and sat with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing hard. For a second, I thought about going back in and demanding answers from Carl. Like he'd have any. Like he hadn't just watched a woman collapse and almost cried because the air felt wrong. So I drove. The road home ran along the water for a while, past closed-bait shops and dark marinas, past a lighthouse I'd seen 100 times and never really looked at. Tonight, its beams swept the fog in slow arcs, and every time the light passed, the water flashed dull silver like a dead fish belly. At one red light, I looked down and saw my lap was damp. I blinked, confused, and realized my napkin had soaked through. Blood from my finger had seeped in my jeans. A dark spot, warm at the center, cold at the edges. I wrapped the napkin tighter, pressing hard, and stared straight ahead until the light changed. My apartment was a cheap place near the waterfront because it was close to work, close to the boats, close to the dive shop, close to the thing I hated and couldn't leave. When I got inside, the air smelled like mildew and salt because every building near the harbor smells like that, and I suddenly wanted to rip my own skin off. I locked the door. I checked it twice. I checked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the wood and breathed. The pipes in the walls gurgled. Somewhere in the building, someone ran a sink. Water moved through old metal like a slow animal. I went to the kitchen and poured a drink. Then another. Then another. I didn't put ice in it because I couldn't stand the sound of cubes clinking like little buoy bells. By the time I stumbled into bed, my head was full of fog. I closed my eyes and saw the pit. The bubbles. Jonathan's mouth forming my name. The knocking in the water. Knock, knock, knock. I must have passed out because the next thing I remember is the sunlight spilling through my blinds and the sound of gulls screaming outside like nothing had happened. My mouth tasted like a dead battery. My throat was sandpaper. My head felt like a pressure chamber. For one sweet second, relief washed over me. It had been a drunk nightmare, a stress hallucination, a panic attack dressed up in bullshit. Then I looked down and saw I was still wearing yesterday's clothes. Jeans, jacket tossed half on, shoes kicked off but still on the floor by the bed with salt crusted on the sides like I'd walked through spray. My stomach turned. I sat up too fast and the room swayed. I fumbled for my phone in my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed fabric, soft, thin, and cold. My whole body went rigid. I pulled my hand out and stared at what I grabbed. Black underwear. The same piece she'd slid into my pocket in the bar, like a joke, like a trophy. Only now, it was wetter than it should have been. Damp, cold, and heavy. When I lifted it, a droplet fell from it onto my carpet. Not clear, dark, oily. It hit the floor and spread into a small, shiny stain that didn't look like water. It looked like something that had been down in the bilge of the ocean for years. I sat there holding it between two fingers like it might bite me. My heart hammered so hard it made my ears ring. Then from somewhere deep in my apartment, maybe the bathroom, maybe the kitchen drain, maybe the pipes in the wall, I heard it. A clean metallic sound. A sonar ping. Ping. And the underwear in my hand, God help me, twitched just slightly like it was responding. Ping. The pipes gurgled, slow and hungry. And somewhere, far beneath the harbor, something knocked on the inside of a hull at a depth where nothing should be alive to knock.